All right, we're here with Paul Sheldon from Dreamosophy. Welcome, Paul. Or Paul, how you doing?
I'm glad to be here.
Good. This reminds me of I don't know, the beginning of the show because I got into lucid dreaming and we were doing shows. Remember, Darren, we were doing shows on this way back when, about 12
Yeah,
years ago.
my kids are into it now. They call it like shifting, but it seems a lot like lucid dreaming. It seems like the same thing where they're trying to fall asleep and meet up in their dreams. And I mean, it's like it would have seemed crazy to me if it weren't for the show, but because it's never been a thing for me. But Graham was buying devices and all that kind of stuff years ago, trying to lucid dream. So it was kind of funny. I don't know if my kids are still into it now, but there was definitely a period in the last few years where they were all three of them were super into it and talking about it, but they were calling it shifting. But it did very much seem like the exact same thing as lucid dreaming.
Have you heard that, Paul?
I haven't heard that phrase shifting. That sounds really interesting. I have to look into it. There are different levels of lucidity. Most people think of vivid dreams where it's very intense and they'll call that a lucid dream. They don't recognize that they're dreaming while they're dreaming. They just recall a really intense dream and they think of that as lucidity. And a lot of people recognize that they're dreaming, but they don't recognize themselves as the dreamer, which is another shift that sometimes happens.
Oh, that's interesting. So
is that
go
is
ahead.
that an experience thing or is that a time thing? I mean, it kind of reminds me of something like a powerful psychedelic experience where you just can't kind of lose that grasp of self. Is like sort of that same sort of thing where you're kind of there and you're kind of not. I mean, in some ways, the dream state seems to be kind of at least on, I would say, parallel with the dream world. I don't know if you would agree with that, but there definitely seems to be a few things in common.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing in common is consciousness, conscious awareness, and the assumptions that we make about who we are. If I recognize myself as the source of the dream, that's a different experience than just responding to the events that are occurring around me. A lot of people look into that about waking life as well, which is a little more difficult philosophically.
How did you get involved in all this? Were you like a lucid dreamer all along, or did you have any?
No, I wasn't, and I'm not a prolific lucid dreamer. I get lucid once in a while, and if I focus on it for months, then I can become lucid. But after I spent about 15 years studying and practicing lucid dreaming, I also got a lot of messages in my dreams that part of what happens when what we call lucidity occurs, that's the me that I recognize as me in my waking life, shows up like, oh, I'm dreaming. I got a lot of messages from characters and situations in the dream world that said, who you think you are when you're awake is not really welcome here.
I just got to think about that for a sec. Who you think you are when you're awake is not welcome here. So you like leave your ego there, kind of.
Yeah, like check your ego at the door. Check your assumptions about who you think you are before you become lucid. But that's not really answering your question. I got into this really when I was a child. Maybe I was 12 or 13 years old, and I always had very vivid dreams, and I dreamt that I was running down a dock being chased by a group of people, and beside the dock there was a canoe, and in the canoe a man was lying down and he had flaming red hair, and I woke up wondering what that was about. And then the next day President Kennedy was assassinated and he was shot in the head, and I remember thinking, oh, that's what my dream was about. And so that kind of got me curious about what this waking dreaming dynamic is. And so I started reading everything I could get my hands on about dreams and consciousness and awareness and yoga and philosophy and all that kind of stuff. I read everything Sigmund Freud wrote and a lot of Jungian books and then a lot of more modern things. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s, I was reading the book Creative Dreaming by Patricia Garfield, that I recognized that I was dreaming when I was dreaming and started to fly. And that opened up a whole new era. And then a few years later, I learned of the work of Stephen LaBerge at the Lucidity Institute, who wrote the book Lucid Dreaming and popularized the phrase, that I really started cultivating that ability to become lucid while dreaming and exploring what that was about. We'll get to talk more about that as we go along, I think.
Yeah. So did you give sort of like just leave that, like not worry so much about lucid dreaming now lately? It just kind of happens when it happens. And
yeah, I had a series of dreams maybe 30 years ago where I was intensely cultivating lucidity.
Yeah.
And I was particularly interested in divinity and experiencing divine states of awareness and the divine nature of life. And I had a series of dreams that kind of completed that for me. And I felt like I didn't need to go any farther.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, I mean, lucidity doesn't have to be the outcome. I mean, lucidity is one possibility from the dream world, but I think we've had other people on the show that talk about healing in the dream world and other sorts of things like that, precognition, learning in the dream world, all that sort of stuff. So what can we start to unpack that a little bit? What is it about dreaming that does excite you? It doesn't seem like you're getting super excited about lucid dreaming, but obviously something about dreaming excites you. So what is it about dreaming that does get you going?
Yeah, it's really dreaming as metaphor for me, because I've never been comfortable with that phrase, oh, it's just a dream. I think that dreaming is the source of possibility. And I use dreaming very broadly to encompass fantasy and daydreaming and imagining. Some people use the phrase the imaginal realm. And that to me is fascinating, because I've always had the ability to dream up having a good time. Even in very stressful situations, I have the capacity to have a good time. And I've never understood why people don't do that. I remember being 8 years old and my parents coming home and saying, we're just tired, we need to unwind. And I remember thinking, that's really stupid, being tired. When I grew up, that's one thing I'm never going to do. I'm never going to be tired. I didn't really pull that off, because I understand now what it's like to be an adult and be tired. But at the same time, I'm always fascinated by the opportunity to have a good time just because I say so, because I find something fascinating to be curious about. And I've always been puzzled by people who suffer. And the Buddhists say pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. And I've just always wondered if it would be possible to treat pain and suffering as learning opportunities and to get through it with something of value. So that the idea of dreaming as metaphor, that no matter what's going on around us, we can dream up some other aspect that enhances the situation that we're in, not to be controlled by the circumstances, but to dream up a world worth living in, or to dream up a life worth living.
Which might bring solutions to the table, right? It might be able to bring you out of whatever sort of negative circumstance you're in. I mean, I really like that, looking at the sort of the glass half full, and like not being bogged down by the event, but maybe coming up with a solution.
Speaking of predicaments, Ian in the chat says, for decades I was on drugs, and if I ever remembered a dream, it would come true, probably once every other month. I've been clean for years now and no longer have any dreams. And he misses that part. I don't know if I'll miss that part. I think that would, like, I don't want any hints, But have you come across that at all?
Well, Ursula K. Le Guin wrote a book called The Lathe of Heaven that dealt a little bit with that, about what it would be like if what happened in your dreams affected what you're experiencing when you're awake. And there have been a number of movies about that recently, where people go into the dream state and they're in an altered reality and they're not clear. Or the old Chinese proverb from Chuang Tzu, who said, am I a man dreaming that I'm a butterfly, or I'm a butterfly dreaming that I'm a man? And not knowing what's the source of self that to me, getting back to your prior question, Darren, that's what's fascinating. And there's some things about waking life that are just difficult to move, like money or relationships or circumstances or physical body issues. And so how is it that seems so stuck in the waking world, and can we get it unstuck? Can we bring forth peace on earth? Can we establish contact with non-human entities? Can we solve the sense of stress and crisis and trauma that lead people to be violent? How can we move beyond that? For years, I led programs on how to dream up a better life in prisons. And how do we take a life that has been dysfunctional and then dream up a different way of being that may not be continuous with what happened before? It could be just an abrupt right turn or left turn or an about face with regard to what's been happening. That's the part that interests me.
What was some of that divine messaging that you sort of, when you sort of completed that stage of the process, what did you come away with? Anything you can talk about at all?
Well, yeah, several things actually. What led me into it was I met a woman who is a Gnostic priest. And I didn't know that women could be ordained as priests, but she had been ordained in a liberal Catholic tradition that was actually more conservative than anything coming out of Rome. Very ancient Christian rituals. And she had been married to one of the translators of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And he was also one of the translators of the Nag Hammadi Library, which is another one of those ancient sets of scrolls coming out of Alexandria, Egypt. And they had looked very closely at this concept of the living gnosis, the ability to experience divine states of awareness directly without an intermediary like a saint. And of course, this is what a lot of the psychedelic movements are about, the botanical medicines, I think it was Terence McKenna who coined the phrase entheogens,
Yeah.
the substances that we can take that induce direct experiences of divine presence, ayahuasca and all those other traditions. I discarded the chemical interventions a long time ago because I'm a dancer and I enjoy dancing, and I find that I can enjoy myself much more when I'm sober. And I like getting into all alternative states of awareness on the natch, if you will, without needing chemical interventions. And so I was using lucid dreaming to inquire into the living gnosis. What is the living gnosis? What is it like to know divine presence directly through an experience? And so I noticed that I was dreaming, and I dove out into the air, and I was flying, and I was having trouble getting altitude, which is a recurring theme for me. How do you know, okay, I can fly, but I just can't take off, and I'm not fully lucid. And so I sat up, and it was like I was riding on a magic carpet, just flying through the air. And I said, now I can inquire into the living gnosis. And these beings of love and light gathered around me. And I knew I was traveling at a very high rate of speed, but they were stable. They were not moving. They were with me, but they weren't moving. It was like they were in a different dimension than the physical dimensions of space and time. They were just present. And they began spinning this cocoon around me of rainbow radiant love and light and comfort and kindness and forgiveness. And they just kind of laid me back down into a supine position and wrapped this cocoon of love around me. And I had never felt such deep recognition and kindness and affirmation than they gave to me. And then I felt them pulling me back into my physical body from the small of my back, from behind me. And they pulled me back in, and they tucked me into my body like being tucked into bed. And I woke up in bed, and I could still feel their presence, even though I couldn't see them. And they have never left me.
Wow.
Which is kind of weird, to have these angelic beings of love and light that I've only seen them twice, but I always feel their presence whenever I listen or ask them to be present.
Wow.
That's interesting, because I was going to ask you if you thought if there's any divinity to dreams.
Yes. And almost every major world religious and spiritual tradition has a pivot point in its origin around a dream. The founders or the channels or the gurus, the originators almost always have some profound dream that shifts who they are.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, sure. Jesus went out and grappled with Satan, and so did Muhammad. Blessed be his name, lest they come after us. And the Taoists have a lot of tradition around dreaming and whether or not we're dreaming when we're awake. The Sufis, the mystical tradition that predates Islam, have a lot of dialogue about dreaming and dreaming up a world, and I dream the world. A lot of the tribal traditions teach that the world is being dreamed by a divine being. The Tibetans have a yoga of entering into a dream state. And so, these are just some examples of the origins of, for example, coming back to Christianity, because a lot of listeners in North America are familiar with the Christian story. Joseph was really upset that his new wife was pregnant until he had a dream. And an angel appeared to him in the dream and said, "Don't worry about it. He's going to be okay. He's a nice kid." He got reassured that something magical was happening. And so those kinds of stories are very common in the origins of all spiritual traditions.
Does it, how do I put it? How much do we how much is it diluted by, like, we've got everyone, it's even worse now. Everyone's got a screen in their pocket. And before that, but even from the time I was a kid, there's always been a TV in the corner of the room and it's on all the time. So we've kind of got all these alternate realities. That's what it seems like, for lack of a better term. We're able to watch all these things on this screen that are very dreamlike, like before a couple hundred years ago, maybe you see that shit in a play, if that was in your culture, but even that is pretty recent in the grand scheme of things. But I mean, so if we're going to go back to Paleolithic man, then it's like there's nothing. There's no one's, maybe the kids are pretending to be this, and there's some pretending, and there's maybe some role playing, and maybe they get kinky, who knows. But outside of that, you're not like, we're immersed in fantasy nowadays, that even in books and in all this stuff that we never used to be. And I feel like the dream world would have had a lot more, maybe, reverence and just, everything. It would have been, you could see a world where people get excited to go to sleep. It's the winter. You've been fucking living in this teepee. Oh, it's cold, it's like minus, but at least when I go to sleep, I mean, we have a version of that today with people that are depressed or in different states. A thing, maybe I'd imagine people that are incarcerated to a certain extent that they just can't wait to fucking get to sleep, to just escape whatever they're doing.
Yeah, and what you were talking about before, the different uses of lucid dreaming, in his second book, Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming, Stephen LaBerge talks about the different uses of dreaming, performance rehearsal and spiritual insight and healing and recreation and all these different aspects of dreaming that can be cultivated. And in the ancient societies, like the Aboriginal societies in Australia, or the tribal peoples of North America, or the Tibetans, once again, there's a deeper reverence for the role of dreaming as the place that we come from when we're born and the place that we go to when we die. And so when a child remembers a dream, they don't say, "Oh, it's just a dream." They listen for, is this a little dream that's personal, that maybe just day residue or some anomaly, or is this a big dream that has meaning for the whole village or the whole culture? And those big dreams filter out. Once someone shares a dream, then it becomes the property of the community. It's not their dream. It's a dream that everyone listens to as if it was their own dream. And then you have waking dreamers like Martin Luther King who have dreams that influence the whole culture. And that's something that is ancient, that people put themselves forth as creative dreamers that are putting forth a possibility that didn't exist before. Sometimes that comes out of the dream world. Sometimes it comes out of nowhere. It comes out of spontaneous speaking or channeling or inspiration or revelation. I don't care. I don't care where it comes from. It's a mystery.
That's fascinating. I mean, so is there a way, because I noticed that, so I call my dreams a lot of times they're adventure dreams. Like I never have nightmares. I never get stressed to the point, like the stress in a dream for me is just fun, or it's just like part of it. It doesn't like grip me like any kind of fear or anything like that. But some of those adventure dreams seem ultra real, like you were saying, like the deep dreams. But a lot of them are just like, I can tell they're just surface level dreams. So is there a way to, and I bet you the ancients did this too, is to manifest the deeper dreams, like getting into those real, that level of meaning that's profound.
Yes, the Greeks had very specific rituals around that. They would fast and pray and bathe and prepare themselves to go to the dream temple.
Wow.
And then they would go to induce an inspirational dream experience. And everyone can do that. The dream world is highly responsive. And that's why inventors and scientists and researchers often receive deep insights in their dream state. The structure of the DNA helix, the sewing machine needle, the book Where the Wild Things Are. These all came out of dream states where people were kind of stumped, and then they had a dream that inspired them to move forward. And that can be cultivated. It's called dream incubation, of consciously cultivating a sense of what's possible.
Do you go through that in your Dreamosophy at all? Or?
I do. And, I wrote this book, Wisdom of Dreaming, that is not about lucid dreaming. It's about what you can do when you become lucid or not. You can do the same things when you're awake. And so it takes place, the process of the wisdom of dreaming that we call Dreamosophy takes place over a series of 18 dreams. You start with 3 practice dreams, and then we have 5 different dream opportunities: how to be free in your dreams, how to feel good in your dreams, how to speak up in your dreams, how to make friends in your dreams, and finally how to understand and realize dreams. And we go through 3 different levels of exploring those opportunities over the course of 18 dreams. And it's really kind of interesting. I'm a slow learner. When I first encountered this process, it took me a year and a half to go through the 18 dreams. But my entire life changed. When I started out, I was living in a junky little apartment above my mom's garage. I didn't have a relationship. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a sense of meaning and purpose in life. I was really kind of aimless, sort of questing around. And by the time I finished 18 months later, I was married to a model who was a PhD in education. I was leading children's programs at John Denver's WinStar Foundation. I was managing hotels in Aspen, skiing 100 days a year, living in a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house with a view of the ski slope. And the guy who wrote the book, from whom I learned those 18 dreams, lived down the street, and I met him by accident.
Oh, no way.
It's just like these kinds of things you can't make up. It's eerie. Some of the things that I call it confluence. The confluence between waking and dreaming life, when we start cultivating our dream lives, then those confluences start to happen and we get messages. I often say you get the whisper in the ear, then you get the tap on the shoulder, then you get the 2x4 upside the head. Something really dramatic happens.
So was that before you started Dreamosophy then? Like how was the start of the Dreamosophy? And I have a couple questions about like the dream, like recognizing if it's in one of the 18 dreams, like that whole process. But maybe we could sort of use that to talk about how Dreamosophy came about.
Sure, because I'd had all these experiences and these beings of love and light came to me And I said, well, I need to talk about you. I mean, I should share who you are with the world. And they said, no, we don't think so. And so for better part of 20 years, I kept asking them, can I talk about who you are, what this experience is? And they said no. And
Even
I
for
said,
my
well,
own good. You're like, come on, I want to.
yeah, I mean, like this might be useful for people to know that you exist. And I said, how do I describe my unique approach? Because here I've been studying dreaming for 30 years. I've learned all this experience about what can be done. What's different about me? Can you give me like a phrase? So the phrase they gave me was onurognostic, wholehearted limnosophy.
Wow.
To which I said, what? So it took me the better part of 10 years to explore those words. Because Stephen LeBears talks about onironauts.
I was going to say, or niromancy.
Or niromancy, exactly. And Oniros, of course, was the Greek god of dreaming. And not sleep, dreaming. Hypnos is the god of sleep. So I knew that word. And I knew gnosis because of all this experience with this tradition of the Gnostic Christianity and Islam and other traditions. So onironosis was pretty okay. Dream knowing that you're dreaming, knowing yourself as the dreamer. That was, I was okay with that part. Wholeheartedness is pretty easy. Wholehearted, is your heart in it? And Carlos Castaneda's whole thing about the weight it has heart. And the Taoists are very big on wholeheartedness and being wholeheartedly in harmony with nature. Limnosophy was a little more difficult. I knew about Sophia, the wisdom, the divine incarnation of women. In the Gnostic tradition, Sophia is the companion of the Christ, of the Logos, and she's the life of the world. But limno, I wasn't so familiar with. I had heard of the science of limnology, which is the study of inland waters. And so I went back. There's a wonderful dictionary, the American Heritage Second Collegiate Edition of the American Heritage Dictionary, that has an appendix in the back that allows you to trace words back to Proto-Indo-European sources. And so I looked up this word limni, and it turns out that limni is a very ancient word that means pool or pond, literally a pond that's made by driving stakes in the ground and creating an impoundment of water. And so limni is a lake or a pool of fresh water. So I was asking, what is this limnosophy, the wisdom of water, the wisdom of pools? And I played with that for many years. And I talked to a bunch of people about what do I do with this? I mean, the acronym is OWL, which is nice. So that immediately blends all the metaphors about owls, which is fun in a lot of cultures. European cultures are fine with owls as symbols of wisdom. Not so much in Islamic, Arabic cultures. They think owls are demonic. Mexican traditions, they kill owls and eat them. They think they're emissaries. They're emissaries of brujos. And so, but I played around with that for a while. And everybody that I talked to said, this ain't going to happen. You're not going to communicate this. It's way too complicated. You can't even tell the story without losing people, which is true. And so I met this marketer in St. Louis who said, well, why don't you just call it Dreamology? So we went on, this is maybe 10 years ago. And we went on the internet. Everybody's doing Dreamology. There's Dreamology this, Dreamology that. There's books, there's websites, there's courses. And so I said, well, how about Dreamosophy? Because that would be the wisdom of dreaming. He kind of scratched his head, and we went out and looked around on the internet. Nobody was using Dreamosophy. So we chose Dreamosophy as the public face of onurognostic, wholehearted limnosophy. And you guys are special, so I don't normally use that phrase at all in public because it's just too complicated. But Dreamosophy seemed like something that people could get their arms around. And another friend who had started a very successful company in Chicago said, don't start with onurognostic, wholehearted limnosophy. Don't even start with Dreamosophy. Start with how to remember your dreams. Start at a very basic level. How do you do that? That's Dreamosophy 101, the first chapter in the book. Start keeping a dream journal, set your intention, go to sleep and wake up at the same time every night. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Drink a little bit of water, not too much. Get a little exercise, not too much. Get full spectrum light. Be out of doors for a while every day. There's a whole science around how to increase your dream recall. And that is the first chapter in the book, because if you don't remember your dreams, you can't get started. And chemicals can interfere with that. So, you have to, a lot of people who are taking medications don't recall their dreams, and then it's a difficult choice, because you have to follow your doctor's orders if you want to stay in that stream of knowledge. And so not everybody has that privilege of being able to recall their dreams, but most people can. It takes a week or two.
Why is it worth pursuing? Why if someone's listening and they're just like, why should I bother with this? What are they missing what are they missing?
Well, the easy answer is it's not for everybody. So if you're not drawn to your own dream life, that's okay. There's no should in this. It's not like you're less human if you don't remember your dreams or you don't cultivate your dream life. But all those reasons that we talked about before, that Stephen LaBerge has outlined in Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming, first of all, it's fun. When you start to cultivate your dreams with a very little bit of practice, you can get beyond the uncomfortable dreams and the scary dreams and the nightmares into a realm of, it's like the ultimate holodeck. You have a world that is completely imaginary. Well, almost completely imaginary. And then what? Then what becomes possible? And performance rehearsal, spiritual exploration, healing insights, scientific and research insights, breakthroughs around things that you're stumped with, tandem dreaming, where you can explore dreaming with another person and cultivate ways to have the same dream, insights, dreams of loved ones who have died, communicating with people. A lot of people have experiences with a father or a mother that has preceded them in death, that they're able to complete their communication. I had a prison guard in Ohio came up to me once, and she said, I'm a Catholic, and when I was younger, my older brother committed suicide. And a kid came up to me in school, and she said, your brother's in hell, right? And she said, I was really disturbed by that, because suicide is a mortal sin, and I thought my brother was in hell, until I had a dream. His name was Davy, and he had this chair that he used to sit in. We called it Davy's chair, and he was a really good hugger. We called them Davy hugs. And I was in a room, and he was sitting in his chair, and he stood up and he came towards me, and he had this pendant around his neck that was as bright as a sun. It was like golden, but it was radiant. And he came towards me, and I could smell his cologne, and he gave me a Davy hug, and he said, "Don't worry, Michelle, I'm fine." And I woke up, and she said, I felt like a weight had lifted off me. Like I didn't have to worry about him anymore. And she said it lasted for a few weeks, and then she started to doubt herself. She said, well, maybe I just made that up. Maybe it was wishful thinking. Maybe it was just a dream. Why should I believe that? Until a friend of hers came up to her, and she said, Michelle, I've been reluctant to talk with you. I've wanted to talk with you for a few weeks to tell you about this dream I had. And in this dream, I saw Davy. He was sitting in his chair, and he stood up, and he was wearing this pendant that was gold, and it was shining brighter than the sun. And he came towards me. I could smell his cologne. He gave me a Davy hug. Wow. And he said, tell Michelle I'm okay, not to worry.
Wow. That's crazy.
Now that changed that woman's life.
Yeah, that would do it.
Yeah.
More than just a single experience, the whole synchronicity of both. Well,
yeah.
Well, the interesting part about that is also that there is that soul rescue program in the Monroe Institute where, there is that sort of limbo or that fear that people can get stuck in that, maybe that area between, here and the next. And maybe that is considered hell. And it kind of has to do with
or limbo.
Or limbo. Yeah.
And that's what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said about people who commit suicide. They often find
Yeah.
themselves in limbo looking
Yeah.
for their lost dog,
Right.
or trying to find their car keys, or trying to remember an appointment,
Yeah.
because they're lost.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah,
And we don't know how long that goes on for.
Yeah, exactly. And then that kind of fits with Cody's question here, going back to the ancient Greeks and stuff. How about the underworld being connected to dreams in Greek mythology?
Well, that's an ancient metaphor, that the underworld is a dream world of sorts.
Okay.
And we can go to the underworld, and there's a lot of mythology about getting stuck there and how to get out, and about different kinds of possession, and whether or not you can get back to your body if you dream that you're going down into the underworld. Nobody knows the answers to these questions. In my opinion, people who claim to know the answer don't. Because I'm very fascinated by mystery, by not knowing and admitting that we don't know. And so inquiring into these questions it's almost like an endless journey.
But we know there's something more, right? I mean, that's kind of what, like, I love, like, I agree with you. I'm like, the more I've learned, the less I seem to know. So but I do know that something, it's not, what we were taught kind of thing, reality is not what we were taught. It's much more mysterious and amazing. So the other thing I wanted to add, or maybe ask you about Darren's question of, like, why would people do it? Why would people want to do it? What about nightmare reduction, or what about people that have attacks, stuff like that? Is this something for that, or do you address
certainly
that?
Lucid dreaming is, and the wisdom of dreaming process also. We have different approaches. In the wisdom of dreaming process, we teach people to recognize that they are feeling, not what they're feeling, but that they are feeling, to add the dimension of feeling to your dream life. And then we play around with the level of feeling. Like, are you feeling very intensely or not very intensely? And what would it be like? And we ask them in their waking life, if you recall this dream that was very intense, that was terrifying, that was life-threatening, that the locomotive was coming at you, or this evil spirit was going to disintegrate who you are, what would it be like if you took that level of feeling one step lower? And we explore what the sort of imaginary process of what would it be like if. And when people begin to do that, their dreams start to shift. So I've had people come up. I had a guy come up to me in a prison once that I was doing a program at, who said, I've never dreamt of anything other than needles. I don't remember a dream that I ever had where I didn't dream about needles. And within a week of starting the wisdom of dreaming, he started having different dreams, where he started to explore what it would be like to be okay and to have different states of consciousness. We hear that a lot with people who say they've never remembered a dream that wasn't terrifying.
Right.
And then within a week or two of starting the wisdom of dreaming process, that shifts by itself. And I think it's very important that we not try to control our dreams. If we simply attend to our dreams, if we invest attention in our dreams by keeping a dream journal for a while, keeping dream journals for years gets to be very onerous, trying to manage that much data, but just focusing on it for a while, dreams will begin to shift in and of themselves. And of course, we want to be careful about clinical diagnoses. Some people are dealing with depression that's a chemical experience that requires psychiatric intervention. If you're dreaming about or concerned about hurting yourself or others, seek professional help from a qualified and certified professional. Don't try to do it on your own. Ask for help. But in the dream state, it also works to ask for help. If you can teach yourself to ask for help when you're dreaming, very interesting things will start to happen.
What about incubus and succubus attacks, that kind of stuff?
Well, those are physiological. They're very different from dreaming. They don't happen during the dream state. They happen during deep sleep, and they're very primal. And so sometimes they correspond to sleep apnea, and it's important to seek medical help and to talk with a doctor or a psychiatrist about those kinds of experiences, because they're very scary, and they're more related to sleepwalking that are not within the dream state. It's a different brain state that's just not the same.
Wouldn't the Dreamosophy sort of training also help you navigate or handle those kind of situations where, like, if you're talking about the feeling and, like, I know you might not want to like commit to it or say it, but it's almost like when you realize you had a past life, like just the acknowledgement or even just the knowing of that makes all the difference in the world. Or just like if you're learning how to lucid dream, you're training yourself to be aware of different things and aware of your feelings and awareness in that space. Like that might help.
It might. And I always caution people to notice, is your life working? If your life is pretty much working, then you can do it yourself with explorations of consciousness and processes like the wisdom of dreaming. If your life's not working, get help. You're not going to get the kind of help that you need out of a book or even out of the Dreamosophy process. A priest, a rabbi, an imam, a guru, a psychologist, a doctor, somebody who's trained and certified. And I'll tell you why I'm so adamant about that is I've had a number of friends commit suicide. And when I was younger, it was very traumatic to me to lose a friend. And I've always wondered if I knew more, if I had been trained to recognize the signs, could I have helped that person? And so be careful and don't hesitate to ask for professional help when you're dealing with major life challenges. I don't want people to think that the wisdom of dreaming process is a panacea that will work for anything. It isn't. It's treat it like a recreation, like a self-exploration, like a vacation that you can handle if your life is working. If your life is not working, get help.
Yeah, I like that. That's awesome. So when you get into the 18 dreams that you did, you went through that cycle of 18
Yes.
dreams. Like what does the process look like? Like, how do you recognize that you did one of those dreams or you were in one of those dreams? Because the dreams can be so kind of flaky or flittery.
Yeah.
Like
that's what the wisdom of dreaming process is about. It gives a structured sequence, and you can do it one a day, one a week, one a month. But you start keeping a dream journal. In the book Wisdom of Dreaming, it is a dream journal. It's not a book to be read. It's a workbook. It's a guidebook in that you keep your dream journal and you write down a dream and then you answer some simple questions. And you write down a dream and then you do some simple activities or exercises. We recommend doing it with a dream buddy. Pick a friend so that you have somebody that's an accountability check so that you stay with the process. And when we do this in groups, we meet once a week usually for an hour and a half so people have a chance to share their dreams and review the activities that they've done in the last week. And that the sequence is non-linear. People go into it with a sense of what they think they're going to get, and they get something. Often they get something totally different. I have a friend in Chicago who was really interested in promoting her real estate career. And she went through the wisdom of dreaming process, and she ended up married and pregnant with her first child, which was what she really wanted in life. And then she went back and got her real estate career going. But that happens a lot. People start into the wisdom of dreaming process, and it's deeper than our conscious thought about what we think is going to happen or what should be happening. And something kind of bubbles up from an unseen source that gives us a sense of confluence between that dream life and the waking life and the affirmation of, oh, this really is what I'm about.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So is there any reason why you wouldn't want to? Because when I was writing my dreams down, I couldn't even read my writing. I was scribbling and you're trying to get it out of your head so fast because you can feel it literally slipping away from you, and you're trying to remember it all, and you might have this this whole story in your head, but by the time you're halfway through writing it down, it's disappearing. So I would keep my phone open to my voice notes. And then I would just reach over and click record and then just start talking.
Yes.
But I there might be a reason why not to use an electronic device because I know writing stuff down also helps in other ways, but
yeah, you kind of have to wake up to do something like that. But it does work, although over time, audio recording are difficult to access. So it's hard to search an audio recording for a key term. Writing down is easier. So a lot of people type now, or they use voice to text to have a written account so that they can go back and search for symbols later. It's up to your individual personal preference as to what works. Keywords are very useful. Sometimes you just write down 10 keywords about the dream that allows you to go back later on and remember it. And a lot of times that's a good way to, if you have to go back to sleep, you just write down 10 keywords and hope that you're going to be able to remember in the morning when you wake up.
Can you use those things to get to that technique to get back into the same dream? If you got a dream, maybe you're like having a good time. You're like,
I have met people who do that. It's called dream reentry. I've never been able to do it, maybe once or twice. I always go back into a wholly different experience, but themes will recur. So the same experience will recur in a different way if it's something that I need to really pay attention to. And so I don't worry about keeping hold of an individual dream, because I've had some dreams that have stayed with me for my whole life, like the dream where the guy was in the canoe with the flaming red hair and the next day the president was assassinated. I've never forgotten that. Or this woman I was talking about whose brother committed suicide. You know, she didn't need to write that dream down. It's like seared in her memory. When my father came to me after he died, I didn't need to write that dream down. It was just crystal clear to me. He was with me. And most people who've had experience where they dream of a loved one who has died, well, they will describe it as the person was really present. It wasn't me making up the dialogue that I'd want to have if I could see this person again. It was like they actually were present. And I love those experiences. I've spoke at a conference 30 years ago of UFO enthusiasts who wanted to use lucid dreaming to contact ETs. And I've spoken with a number of people who've done that, you know, and I can't say that these beings of love and light that I encountered weren't ETs. You know, they're an alternate form of being. So they're interdimensional beings. And you talk to people who study crop circles, and they know that there's some interdimensional being that's communicating with us through the crop circles, and nobody knows who that is. And so,
well, you never know. I mean, we might get an answer tomorrow. I think Paulina Luna is making an announcement.
Well, that would be good.
She says it's bigger than ETs. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that could be like what you're talking about.
Watch your newspapers. Except that kind of stuff usually doesn't make it into print.
No, it won't. No, but I mean, she's you know, it's such an interesting time, because a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, you know, this whole metaphysical realm is getting some attention in the government and the mainstream media. You know, It's super fascinating.
Yeah, I'm happy to see those dialogues coming to the fore. You know, some of those old records getting released. And people gaining access. Well,
I was going to ask you about that. If you got it, because it was the day before the president got assassinated. Did you get any closure from the recent JFK dump? You know, I haven't really looked into it, but I heard a lot of people saying it looks like it was the driver, and I thought Trump said that the CIA did it. I mean, is that any of that? Like, first of all, I guess I should have started that by saying, did any of that, like, what? Is there any sort of where did that stick with you at all? That
it did not come back around in my dream life. I'm sorry to say.
Again?
No.
What did you end up with? Any sort of fascination or fixation on the assassination, or
fascination, not a fixation? You know, I've read most of the things I can find, and and then of course when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, it was like, oh shit, again. And so many of the assassinations of that period were just so questionable. The crazed lone gunman theory is just, like Martin Luther King. I mean, you go to Memphis and you go to the Lorraine Motel, and then across the street from the Lorraine Motel, there's another little museum that has some stories in it that they admit they can't actually say what they know, but it's very clear what they're pointing to. And, Malcolm X and so many of the assassinations were just so questionable that I just I stepped back from it, because what I gained from so much of that is, if you're really trying to make a difference, there are a number of areas where if you actually start making a difference, they kill you. And that really scared me. And so I just stepped back.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That would seem to be the case. That's probably still the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember my sister went to a lecture with Saul Alinsky about 1967 or 68 in Los Angeles. And as he was leaving the stage, somebody yelled from the back of the room, "What can you tell us about NSA?" And he turned around and he pointed at the guy and he said, "Those 3 letters will get you killed." And he left. Because at that time, nobody had heard of the NSA.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we're peons. we don't get to engage in those dialogues unless something really dramatic happens. But I will say, I've known people who were members of the Trilateral Commission, and I've known Rothschilds, and I've studied a lot, read a lot about the Illuminati and that, you know, all those movements. And I'm pretty convinced at the ripe old age of 73 that nobody is in charge.
Is a force in charge? Is something in charge?
I don't think so.
No.
The closest I've been able to come is there is a cosmic universal pattern of harmonious movement and rest. And we are part of that pattern. And if we gave it a gender, it would have to be feminine, because the source has to be feminine by definition. And it more or less cares about life. It's not an anthropomorphic God who pays attention to individual lives, you know, the hair on the head and all that kind of stuff. It's more like just this gentle pattern of life that affirms life, and that, you know, on balance,
an equilibrium. I
works
was just
out.
going to say an equilibrium. Yeah.
It's an equilibrium, but it's not a stable state because it goes on forever.
Yeah.
And so it has
There's
to
always
be
a
just a
push
little
and
bit
pull
off,
and a little push and
the
pull all the
perpetual
time.
motion.
Yeah.
And that's what distinguishes life from entropy. Life is inherently asymmetrical, and there's just a little piece that's enough off to tip it over and keep it going.
That's fascinating.
That's why AI is.
that.
That's why AI
no.
is doomed. It's going to start to eat itself, and it's going to entropy because it doesn't have that little bit of spark.
Well, that's the
condition.
difference, right? Is
human
that
condition.
the
I think it's something to do with emotion. I think it's the tie of those two things that makes it, you know, that, I mean, that's sort of taking divinity out of it, which I'm not convinced I've done yet. But outside of that, it seems to be the play of those two things. But I don't know, because I've never been like a cat. So I don't know how a cat
or a cockroach or a rock or a planet or a solar system.
Have you ran into any, like, you this force, this thing? Has it ever poked through in your dreams? Is it?
Yeah. So the two extremes are, well, while I was inquiring into the living gnosis, I was in a dream once, and I got some water out of a vending machine, which seemed a little odd because at that time, which is 30 plus years ago, they didn't sell water in vending machines. And my brother-in-law had been talking about how the Ogallala Aquifer under the Midwestern United States is ancient, like it's Pleistocene groundwater. It's really, really old. And so I opened this can of water, and I flipped the pop top, and this little dinosaur crawled out. It was like a horned lizard, just a little dinosaur. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because it must be Pleistocene groundwater. It's a little dinosaur. But then I went, whoa, wait a minute. This is not normal. I must be dreaming. And so I said, now I can inquire into the living gnosis, to experience the living gnosis. And I ran downstairs and out into the street. And I could feel and see that the entirety of manifestation is manifesting out of awareness. It's pure awareness. It's awareness manifesting as what we see as the experiential world, but it's coming from an unseen source that is limitless and eternal, that there's always this coming forth. And an aspect of the coming forth is also receding in some places. So that's the one end, is this limitless fountain of emergence that if you get down into the most infinitesimally small aspects of quarks and gluons and muons and string theory and all that, you know, physical stuff, where the physics just breaks down because there's just nothing there but consciousness in form. That's always coming present. Now, the other end is the dreams that I've had where I encounter the force of absolute evil.
Wow.
That is unknowable, and in its nature, it is the destructive force in the presence of which whatever, like a black hole, whatever enters it just ceases to exist. It's just over. And I have never had the courage to confront that because I've never been willing to risk. Maybe that is what that is. And if I question it, if I approach it, if I turn towards it, I cease to exist. The only way I know to deal with that presence is to wake up. And I don't know what to do with that because, a lot of people say, oh, you need to confront that. That's an aspect of yourself and you need to transform that into a lesson or, the teacher or whatever. I never had that courage.
Sometimes you just gotta get the fuck out of Dodge.
That's exactly what I do.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know. Agree with all
yeah,
that. Because you get these other people that they'll just gotta yell Jesus or some shit or whatever.
Right.
Sort of
what would Jesus do? Or God help me? Or and they say it'll work.
Send it love. Send it love or something.
Yeah, and then it will transform into a frog. Or I've never had that courage.
But I just finished reading this book called Transcendental Magic by Eliphas Levi. I don't know if
I have heard of that.
And it's very similar to what you're saying. I mean, this is like ancient wisdom. I feel like it's the equilibrium, the push and pull, and everything in movement. I mean, it really feels like you're just explaining what he wrote in the mid 1800s. And he was talking about the ancient wisdom. So
he was a savvy dude. Yeah, all that Western esoteric culture stuff. It's very deep.
Yeah, it seems to be like we've lost a lot of that,
No, it's always been esoteric.
True. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
By definition.
Yeah. I asked the Mormon missionary once why we never hear about God's wife, because they said, of course she is present, and they said, are you kidding? Look what this world did to his son. Why would he let us know that his wife even exists?
No, wait, that was his daughter-in-law. Before we start to wrap up, what's one mind-blowing dream experience you've had that you can maybe share with us?
Well, the presence of beings of love and light was really the most profound dream experience that I've ever had. And next to that was probably meeting my father. And he died when I was 20, and I was really mad. And I was yelling at him, Daddy, why did you leave me? And he came to me and he gave me an image of these Greek amphorae, the vessels they used to fill with olive oil or water. And it was like a barbershop hall of mirrors. It was a line of these vessels that went on forever. And they were all empty. And he said, from time immemorial, fathers have poured their water of life into their sons. And that's what I did with you. I gave you everything I had to give. And then I was done. And now it's up to you to go on.
Wow.
And I woke up.
Wow.
And that's one of those dreams that I didn't have to write down.
Yeah, exactly.
And I forgave him for dying because he was done. He had done what he could. So that's the closest I can come.
I think the one for me is I was like walking down some path in the woods. I even know the path. There's a very specific path in my hometown that I used to go down all the time on my bike. And there's just like a growl, like a wolf or a bear or something. And then I just woke up. It was like 5 seconds. But for some reason, it just stuck with me, my whole life.
There's another one that kind of woke me up where I did a cosmic zoom. The Monroe Institute recommends lucid dreaming as a way to have out-of-body experiences. And so I lifted up out of my body, and I remember turning over and looking at my own face and being very startled because I'd never actually looked at my own face before. And then I went up and I lifted up above the town that I was in and up above the region, and I got out beyond Earth, and I could kind of see the hemisphere of the Earth. And then I went out into the solar system, and past the planets, and I was going out towards the stars. I remember thinking as I got out towards the edge of the solar system, how am I going to find the Earth? And then I could see the Milky Way, and I was beyond the Milky Way, and I was like, how am I going to find my way back? And as I was thinking that, these two impish presences flew by me at like the speed of light, and they said, "We're in." And I immediately grasped that they were going to take my body because I was stuck out there. And so I woke up and I beat them back because I'm still here.
You show those bastards.
Yeah, see, you're aware enough to hear them. You're aware enough to
I don't know
hear
where
them.
they went, but I'm glad I got back first. So it's important to be careful. Some weird things can start happening when you get too far into the dream world.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything from Dreamosophy that we missed that we should talk about?
No, I think you've done a wonderful job of letting me talk about it. Thank you. The question I always ask people is, how do you know that you're not dreaming right now? And my answer is, we don't. You can know that you're dreaming, because if you can jump up in the air and float, or if you can talk to your dead father, or if you can fly, Amina Mara will pull on her fingers to see if they stretch. You can do things to verify that you're dreaming, but you can never be sure that you're not dreaming, that you're awake.
You could just wake up tomorrow morning in 5th grade history class.
There you go.
All over. Man, I heard some stories of some dudes smoking salvia, and they're like, they go into this trip where they have a whole family that they fall in love with, and it seems like it goes on for years, and then they just wake up and they're like, that's some shitty party.
I call those epic saga dreams.
Yeah, I'll kick your ass. Well, Paul, this has been great. Where can people find all your stuff? Give us the website URLs and any social media.
Absolutely. Dreamosophy.com. We're not very active on social media. We have accounts on X and Instagram and Facebook and all those things, but Paul@dreamosophy.com is my email. You're welcome to reach out to me. I'd love to hear about your dream experiences and what you think dreaming is good for. And you all have been wonderful. Thank you for asking all these insightful questions and being open to my outrageous answers.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Paul. That was great.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks, Paul.
An auspicious beginning.
Absolutely. Have a great night.
Take care.
And that was a chat with Paul Sheldon from Dreamosophy. What'd you think?
Yeah, that was fun. I think I'm going to maybe start recording my dreams again, because I'm having some pretty crazy dreams. And I just tried to tell my girlfriend about them a couple minutes ago, and I couldn't remember. I could only remember one little aspect of it. I want to start remembering again.
I'm the worst, because Sean will try and tell me about her dreams, and I'm just like, yeah, I got to go to work, right? It's usually like she's mad at me because I fucking cheated on her or something, some bullshit. I don't got time for this. Anyway, I did have time for Paul. That was a great chat. Big thanks to Paul for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys for listening. Of course, even bigger thanks, guys, if you're one of the 1% that choose to support the work over at Grimerica.ca/support. If you can, when you can, no matter where you're listening or watching this, we don't get paid. So the only way we get paid is if you sign up there at Grimerica.ca/support. We get paid by you guys. Sign up for monthly or make a one-time donation and keep us going into year 12. And, we'll be great. You'll be a noble in Grimerica. Of course, check out GrimericaOutlaw.ca for other podcasts where we get a little more controversial. Then we have GrimericaCBD.com for all your CBD needs, CBD tinctures and gummies, some THC stuff there as well, GrimericaCBD.com. You can also, if you're interested in being affiliate with that, let us know. Contact at the cabin for the trips. We have Atlantis is unfortunately sold out already with Randall Carlson in the Azores, but you can get on the waiting list, or you can go to the Bonneville trip with us. We got a few. Graham's cat attacked him or some bullshit. Those goddamn cats. You can come to Bonneville. If you go to contact at thecabin.com, there's about a dozen spots left for that. It's a great crew coming together for that trip, and you can get on the waiting list if you email me. What am I missing? Adult Brain.
Audiobooks.
Adultbrain.ca for all the audiobooks. 150 almost, coming in on 150 audiobooks. We're working on getting them all out in print and ebook and hardcover as well, in new reprints. So I think I got about 40 or 50 of them up to go, ready to go. So you can check that out if you want to buy those books. Of course, you can just get them too if you just punch in Adult Brain Publishing and Audible or Spotify or Amazon. You can get all that stuff. And you can also publish your book through us. We're doing self-publishing services where we'll get your book into all the bookstores, 40,000 stores through Ingram, the biggest distributor in the world. We'll get your audiobook out there into all the places and do all that for you. We got a bunch of different packages. And we sold over $1 million worth of books since 2020. Unfortunately, we get a very small percentage of that. But I mean, it is brutal how much Amazon and Spotify take. It's disgusting. It's, people wouldn't believe it. But anyway, check it out. A bunch of different options there. We'll do all the dirty work for you. And I think that's it. Other than that, we love you guys. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.